Well, good evening and welcome to our first Mondays event of 2021. My name is Greg Michael and I'm chair of the Department of Cinematic Arts at Azusa Pacific University. We're excited this evening to have as our guest somebody whose work is not only known throughout the world, but who's contributed to some of the most well-known and culturally significant filmmaking of the last 50 years. And how many times can you say you're hosting the man who shot Jaws? It's funny because just the other night, my family and I were watching the film Grease with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John, one of our all-time favorites. And it totally slipped my mind until I saw the credits that our guest tonight filmed that one too. Anyway, in a moment, I'm going to turn this over to our cinematography instructor, Paolo Cassio. But before I do, I wanted to introduce you to our Cinematic Arts department if you're not already familiar with us. Our department offers 5 undergraduate degrees, including majors in film production, screenwriting, games, and animation. Our class is taught by industry professionals. If you're not interested in making films, we also offer a major in cinematic arts with concentrations in screen studies, where you can watch a lot of films and television and write about them, or entertainment executive, the entertainment executive track, where you can learn how to package, finance, and market films. We also have a low residency master's degree in screenwriting that's great for working professionals. If you want more information about our department, degrees, to see samples of student work, please visit apu.edu/cinema or apucinema.com. And now, without further ado, here is Paolo Cassio to introduce you to our very special guest for the evening.
Well, thank you, Greg. And I just want to extend a huge thank you to my dear friend and colleague and mentor, Bill Butler, whose track record is absolutely astounding. Bill has photographed some of the biggest movies that have ever been shot, and a lot of movies that I grew up with. I remember seeing Jaws when I was a kid, and of course that terrified everybody to go on the water again after that. One of my favorite musicals of all time, Grease, of course, and 3 Rocky movies, as well as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Anaconda. The list goes on and on and on. Bill Butler is no stranger to Hollywood, and he's an absolute legend. I am very proud and excited to share with you tonight, Bill, and we're going to just kind of have a nice conversation with him about how his career got started, some of the films that he's worked on, the many, many first-time directors that he helped launch their careers and did big feature films for. And then after that, we want to be able to take some questions from you, our audience. So I'd just like to welcome, first of all of our APU students on campus that are tuning in. We've got a lot of high school students that are also watching this online that have joined us. And we're also streaming on Facebook. So I'd just like to welcome the entire community to this webinar this evening. And so without further ado, I would like you all to say hello to my dear friend, Bill Butler. Bill, before we get started into talking about all these, amazing films that you've done, I wonder if you could take us back to the very beginning of what inspired you to be in this industry, and how did it all start for you?
Well, that's a big question, because it involves a whole career in television that I had before I started film at all. I was probably 40 years old when I started in the movie industry. Now, to somebody that's in his 100th year on Earth, that's what is really amazing is what we're doing this evening, where I'm watching you on electronic devices that never existed when I first started. I built the very first, or helped build the very first television station in Chicago, and then stayed as an engineer for about 15 years at WGN Television, won an Emmy as a cameraman on an engineer at WGN. That all happened before I ever started the movies, before I ever started 1 foot of motion picture film. But William Friedkin was at the same station at the same time. And we got together and started making documentaries, and then went into the motion picture business. It's amazing all of the things that you do at your university, and I am very impressed by it, and I'm very thrilled. But you must realize that what you're doing right now at this moment is completely different than the rest of my life. And 100 years of my life is a lot of things to remember. Things like the first day plastic was invented is very exciting to me. The people watching this were not even born yet when this happened.
And so, Bill, when you talk about your experience as an engineer at WGN, like, what was your background? Did you study any of that in school, or what got you into that initial field of working at the television studio?
Well, if you go back that far, I was at the State University of Iowa studying high frequencies. And so when they started building the first TV stations, there was no parts. You had to build everything. You had to get spare parts and put them together and make them work. And so they needed people with high frequencies knowledge. And someone, I have no idea who, found me at WIND, a radio station, an all-night record station in Gary, Indiana, which covered Chicago. And so they asked me if I wanted to work on the television. Kaufman and some of the people that hired me for building the very first TV station liked me well enough to take me over to the WGN, which was the second TV station. And that I started working on that, but they took me over to the AM station to do music. And so I became the person to send out to all of the dance halls in Chicago, which was entertaining all of the movie people, all of the music people that came through town. So there's such a mixture of experiences that we couldn't even cover them in this program. But the motion picture industry was very exciting because I helped, I started with Coppola on his very first movie, which was Rain People. And I had 20 or 30 first-time directors in my experience. And that I think is perhaps important to people who are studying to be cinematographers, how you can work with directors when it's their very first time. What element is it as a DP do you have to accomplish that? And it's a question I have to ask myself because I'm not sure about it myself. Evidently I had it because I had 20, 30 first-time directors to my credit, which is more than most people in Hollywood have had.
Yeah, that's quite an accomplishment. Before I ask my next question, Bill, I want to just remind everybody that's tuning in right now that we do have a Q&A that is available. If you'd like to ask Bill Butler a question about anything and everything, we'd like to invite you to post your questions in there, and we'll do our best to try to answer as many of those as possible. So, Bill, it's fascinating to hear about how you did this amazing career, as an engineer, and you had all this incredible experience. I'm wondering, like, as you went from that life that you had in that, and then transferring over into film, what did that first script look like, and what were some of the thoughts that were going through your mind of, like, how do I tell this story on this movie?
Well, the experience was very amateurish because when I worked in television, and I'm talking about television when you could not put the camera on your shoulder. This is before the days of chips. And so it was all heavy duty equipment. And so I had no experience whatsoever in film, but you learn a lot of things about lenses and composition, in the days of television. And the people I'm talking to, I'm sure, have no memory whatsoever of that kind of television. This was the days of the vacuum tube. So that's a whole thing. I could talk for half an hour on that. And I'll try not to, because I know the people that are interested now are interested in what very thing that we're doing, which is watching electronic, which enables them in film or on making a motion picture, the ability to change the contrast, change the colors, change the size, put people on the screen that don't even exist. It's beyond imagination. And so I'm sitting here at 100 years trying to put all of that into perspective, and it blows your mind. But I think that something that is important is what elements should a cinematographer, or those that are studying to become cinematographers, what elements is it that from the old into the new should they retain? What should you learn? What should you study? What should you try to understand? And I put at the top composition as something that carries over. It's no different between the old and the new, what is really good composition and what isn't. And learning that is very important. I think the way to do that is to study the old masters, the paintings, and to see what elements made them great. And once you got that in your head, then as far as I'm concerned, forget it. Because then it's you, it's what's coming out of your personality. It's all of those things you've learned that are coming through your personality, and they will be affected by what you do. And whether you like it or not, your images will start to reflect your own personality. And so, I find that that's one of the things that's not the only thing, but that's one of the things that's important. The other thing that I think you should think about is the truth of whatever it is that you're after in any given script. What is the truth in it? In Jaws, for instance, that it was a great truth. There was a secret, unspoken agreement by all the publishers of all the newspapers of all of those places that had sand beaches all over the world not to report the shark attacks. And this, when Jaws came out and spoke about that very truth, that they all changed. Today they report them. I don't think people think about Jaws in that respect much, but it's a great truth that they need to know and understand, that it was about truth. That's what the movie was about.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back at what you just said about, how the cameras have changed and what you had to work with when you initially started. I imagine, the dance contest in Greece, I would imagine they were probably at least that big. Was that some of the equipment that you had to work with when you first started off at the television station? Was it similar to
that? The cameras in the film that in the dance studio in the
yes, actually the camera that is presented in that picture is the ones that I was working with. They were huge. I think the one they put on the movie is one that had the four lenses, had a rack situation where you could pick the lens. And that's what I learned from my experiences in television, is how the lenses work, depth of field, what different lenses look like. So I came into the motion picture business with that kind of knowledge, but I never went to a school like yours. I did it all through. Actually, the truth of the matter is that I didn't, I never thought going into the movies was even a possibility for me. It was the belief in other people's that I had worked for in the TV. They had the faith that I had that kind of ability. And so when Friedkin, who I had worked with, and is my great mentor in that field. We did some documentaries together and won every award there was. So when he went to Hollywood, he met Coppola, and Coppola was looking for a certain kind of cameraman that didn't obey all of the union rules of the West Coast, because he wanted to pick somebody from the Chicago, somebody from New York, and one person from the West Coast, and make a crew up like that. And he did with a crew of 12. And so Friedkin recommended me to Coppola, and that's how I got started in the movie business, really. Once I shot for Coppola, Coppola became so famous so fast and was so well known to the right people. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to hire me for first-time directors, and that's how it came for all the rest of them.
Sure. What did I'm just curious, what kind of film stocks and things like that were you working with when you did those first films, and the cameras? What kind of equipment did you have to work with on those early productions?
Well, when I first started, there was no daylight stock, if you're talking about the Kodak films. And in fact, the people from the factory of Kodak came out and asked me, what would you do? How can we improve what we've got? And I said, well, the only thing they had was the indoor light. I said, if you time it for outdoors, you pick up 3/4 of a stop right there and have an outdoor kind of film. And they did. It took a while, I didn't hear from them for about a year. They came and they said, here's the outdoor stock, go test it. And of course I did, and it was beautiful. And today it's one of the major stocks that you pick, even as fast as the ability of electronic is. But you have the abilities electronically to do so much more than they could do in the labs of film. So a lot of the directors still like to use film because of the feeling of the rhythm of the old stock is more like the 60 cycle electric lights. The curve is gentle. And when you go to what the things they can do with chips, it's like a square. The up and downs are very sharp, very harsh. It gives a different look to the footage, different feel, and it is more human to use the old 60 cycle. That's more what rhythm that comes through. It's hard to nail it down and explain it, but that's part of what makes it look different. And some people still shoot on film, then transfer it to electronic, and then you can do all the magic of the changing the contrast and colors, etc.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jaws, and I know that I've got a little bit of an advantage over a lot of people because I've gotten a chance to work with you on several occasions, and I remember one of the things that you were trying to tell to Stephen. Could you talk a little bit about your decision with him on putting the camera at water level?
Well, when I first went in, I had shot 2 movies for television with Steve before we did Jaws. So when I saw him getting out of his car where the writers were working at Universal, because I was working at for small time, I worked as a writer there. And so I said to him, I hear you're doing a movie about a fish. And of course, he appreciated the humor in it and then says, well, yeah, I'm looking for somebody. Of course, I knew that. And he had been looking in New York because they wanted him to use people from New York because there was on Martha's Vineyard would be cheaper union-wise. And so he says, come in tomorrow and let's talk about it. And when you've worked with a director of 2 movies already, you don't go in and try to sell yourself to him anything. He said, there wasn't much to talk about, but one thing he says, can you shoot day for night? And I said, oh, certainly, it's easy. I didn't realize he was saying day for night on the water. I had never done that. But when I realized that, I didn't say anymore, I just let it go, let it pass. And we even talked about, I had shot on the West Coast, handheld on the shoulder with a small 16 millimeter camera. And I knew that you could do it without a gimbal. Every movie they've ever shot on the ocean, they used a gimbal to take the rocking of the boat out. And so I said to him, I want to try handheld. And he said, oh, no. I want everything on a tripod. I realized he had no idea what I'm talking about. So I just let it go. And so when I got out on Martha's Vineyard, I had to show him how you could put the camera on the shoulder and take the rocking of the boat out better even than a gimbal. And because you could look at the edges of the thing and see the horizon, and you could put in a little rock or take it all out with your knees, totally with your knees. And so I got a good Martha's Vineyard. I showed Spielberg about, and he's brilliant. So he catches on immediately. You don't have to tell him twice. And he shot 90% of it on handheld.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the POV of the shark?
Oh yeah, and so to put the camera that we're using, which wasn't an underwater camera, we also had that, but to do it right on top of the water, I had them build a box out in the West Coast for me, big enough so that I could set the camera in it and take it out quickly without having an underwater operator put on a suit and do all that. So I had to make this big box that you could set the camera in. And the reason for that, and people that are studying to become cinematographers have to realize that part of their ability with the camera is to create tension. Where you put the camera, what you do with it can make a lot of tension without any words or anything in the script. You do it yourself. And in Jaws, if you put it right on top of the water, the illusion is you're looking up across the top of the water. Kids maybe are swimming. Right underneath that is perhaps a shark. And that feeling of maybe a shark is right there creates tension. And that's one of the ways that a camera can cause tension in a picture.
Yeah, that was just wonderfully done. I remember you sharing that with us and how you had come to that decision to do that, and it was incredibly effective. So when you finish Jaws, I'm looking at some of my favorite films that you've done. What was it like to shoot a musical after you shot a movie like Jaws with, when you shot Grease? What was that experience like for you?
Well, I think I have an experience with that musical that is very rare. The person that wanted to do the thing had the rights to do the movie, had never done a movie before in his life. And so when he hired me, I went in to meet the director, and the director had quit and he was gone. I didn't even get to know him. And so now here is a producer with one person. He's hired a cameraman and nobody else. And he doesn't even have the money to make the picture yet. And so one of the first things that he had to do was to get a script that was good for movies, not necessarily a stage show. And so he sent me to New York to see the stage show. And he says, what can we take from that And what do we keep? What we don't want in our movie? And I said, well, there was a lot of excitement in the choreography. And so he took that advice and hired the choreographer from Greece. And then he wanted to know, we don't have a script for a movie. We need to, what do we do? And he liked old-fashioned movies with Stairway to the Stars and all of that. And here we're doing a high school comedy. And so I said, well, why don't we do two things? Let's make some of the scenes old-fashioned movie style and some of the scenes like up to the moment. And he liked that idea. And so then I designed the picture. That's very rare for a cinematographer to design, right? That's very, very rare. It never happens that I've known of. But so I designed this picture so that when they're working on the old car, then you switch over and here's their ideal car, the
Grease Lightning
dance number over it. And the Stairway to the Stars we put in there. And so that became the style of the picture. And we went to the East Coast to look for a director because we still didn't have one. And so we went to Philadelphia, and Olga White, the great cinematographer, was offered the picture. She said she didn't want to do it. So we still didn't have a director. And so the money man was coming down from New York to Philadelphia that night. So I sat down on the tablecloth and drew out my plans for the movie. And he is such a great salesman, never produced a movie before, remember, but he sold this idea to the man with the money, and he got it that night, says, you're on. So wow. We then started to hire people and bring them in based on that. And the only thing we got from New York was the choreographer. Otherwise, it was all the movie style, which you have to do. It's failure if you try to do the stage thing that was done on stage. It's never worked yet. They've tried it several times, and that doesn't work. So we went with our version.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that are, Grease is like their favorite musical. I've watched it, I don't know how many times, and it's just, every time it's just a joy to watch it, and just the music and the way, you shot it. It was so beautifully done.
It sold musical records at the time, made more money than any other musical. And that's saying a lot because there's been a lot of great musicals.
Yeah. So we talked about Jaws. We just talked a little bit about Grease. What was it like when you came into working on the Rocky movies with Stallone? What was that experience like? And how was that genre, going from, you got a suspense movie with Jaws and you got a musical with Grease, and now you're shooting something that's more dramatic and has some action in it. What was that collaboration working with Stallone like?
It was great and very exciting and very tough, because he is one of the toughest people you could ever work for. First of all, it was the first time he ever directed. So I shot Rocky 2, 3, and 4. So I worked with him 3 times. Each time, our ability, both with the camera and the coordination between Stallone and myself to make the picture work better, got better each time. Each movie was better than the last. And it's the first time that I worked on a remake that made more money than the original. So we crossed a lot of bridges in that one, but we became very fast friends. Obviously, you don't work with Stallone 3 times if you're not his buddy, because he is very strong and very difficult to work for. There's one story that I tell about the time that he would, what it was like, that's what it was like working with Stallone. We were shooting in a little, like almost a closet, a small room, and there was no place for the camera, and there's 2 people in the shot. And so we went into the room, and so I told the crew, put it over in the corner on the floor, shooting up. and we can get more action in that spot than any other. So we did. We sent the camera up, and Stallone comes in and says, "Oh, not there." And that's the way. Sure, you're right. That's how you work with Stallone. Come in. No, I don't want to. So I looked at my crew, and the crew says, wait a minute. They have to set it up again. How many times we want to do this? And so we moved it. They all said, okay. Boom. We put it in another spot. That don't work. We put it in another spot. That don't work. Pretty soon it's back in the same place we started. He says, yeah, that's it. That's the spot. And so I looked at the crew, and they all said, oh, okay. And that's a pretty good way to tell you what it's like working with Stallone.
Yeah, doing the dance.
Just keep working at it, and you probably had it in the right place the first time.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine there's a lot of patience, and then like once that trust was built, then I would presume that he gave you a little bit more leeway and trusted you to do what you had to do for him.
That's exactly what happened. Was as time went by, things that I had learned in other movies from good actors, like Robert Duvall, who's underplays everything, and Stallone was yelling is in the fight plane. He's yelling his lines at the guy to hear him. He's yelling them, and it really wasn't effective. You're hitting and yelling, and it's all muddled. So I called him over to the side, and I said, try something for me. Try just barely say your lines. Just let him barely hear them, but let's show it all in your face and in the way you act. So he did. He underplayed it, and the old saying, less is more, is true, and it's exactly what he did, and it was very effective. And so he saw that on the screen later, and so he would take a lot of advice from me and try not to let the whole crew know. But he'd come over to the side of the ring and ask, how was that?
Yeah, and, that's great. So
we got to become very close, you might add.
That's terrific. Well, I want to get to some of these questions we have over here from our guests. One of our cinematography students, Isaac Simon, would like to know, what was your biggest aha moment, if you can nail it down to one? I'm sure you've got many, that you had on set while you were working.
I'm such a fan of the movie business because, I got involved with people who are so important to, and I was able to stay afloat all the time with them. And so, I have to ask myself, what is there one movie that I liked so well? And the truth of the matter is, I tried to study all the old movies, and there are certain rules for cinematographers that come down from the old movies that you didn't break those rules. One of them, for instance, is the style you have in one frame must carry over into the rest of the movie. So it all has a common look to it. And there's many, many rules like that came down from the old guys, the really great guys that did all the old movies, which most of it was very well lit, colorful. And so when I came from Chicago, from television, I started to introduce things that they had never seen before. One of them was a thing I shot at Universal before I was even allowed to come to the West Coast. It was a tricky union rule that allowed me in. And so I lit the thing entirely bounce light. And they never before had tried bounce light. That was a feature that was never used, and all against the rules, as you will. And so I was breaking the rules, and it was my first time to shoot on the West Coast. And so here I am using techniques that I could try in Chicago and nobody paying attention. But I brought bounce light to the West Coast. They were so amazed by it at Universal that when the show was over and the union rule that allowed me to shoot there, no longer applied, I had to go back to the West Coast and back to Chicago. They didn't want to let me go. The people ran Universal. I said I had to stay there, and they couldn't use me as a cameraman, so they made me a writer. So for a while, for a short period, I wrote with Phil Kaufman and I, and we did some specials for him, and then I soon got back into shooting movies because that's really what I wanted to do. But that's just one of the crazy times.
That's wonderful stuff. The bounce light, I could imagine. You know, one of the things that amazes me is how we, you know, Conrad Hall talked about the happy accident and how sometimes you're shooting something and it's this process of discovery. And, you know, sometimes that intuition, you know, like you talked about, like once you learn your craft, it's got to come from inside. It's got to come from the story and being true to the story, like you had mentioned. And so how did you go about doing that when you bounced the light? What was everyone standing around going, what is he doing? Or were they just like, this looks really great?
Well, it was a strange experience because I came into their studio from Chicago. Here is this guy who's never shot a feature film in the West Coast ever, coming in for the first time. And the way I acted, I've asked myself many times, why did you do it? I walked into their stage. This is their best stage indoors on the stage. And this set was 2 stories high. There was a stairway to the second story. So it was a big set. It was their favorite set, frankly. They'd used it probably in other films. And so they gave us that set. And I walked in and it was lit. No, it had been lit by cinematographers for days and days. You perfected it. They've got it so as perfect as they're going to get it. You know, you're competing with the best on the West Coast. And I went in and I looked up at this beautiful set and I thought to myself, there's no way you can make it look better. So I said to the guy, turn them off. And he looked at me and they thought, boy, you're going to kill yourself here, baby. They went boom off the light. And I said, now bring me those big sheets that you got against the wall over there. They were sheets that used on ceiling pieces. So I said, bring them over, set them here. And now I want 10Ks laying on the floor, bouncing into them. So I put about 4 10Ks down on the floor, not in the stand, shot them into this and bounced the light into the room. I said, now bring in the arc lights and put them behind the set and come through the windows. And so I had soft light on one side and the sunlight from the other. They had never seen anybody do something silly like that.
Yeah.
I really stuck my neck out so far to get it cut off because, frankly, you know, I couldn't stay. It was the only time I'm going to shoot in there. But I did this on purpose, and I have to think back to myself, what made you do a silly thing like that? You didn't have to, you know, but, you know, why did I do that? But it so impressed Universal because they'd never seen a lightning like that. Because I also, in the other sets, I continued to bounce light the whole thing. So it had a look to it was different from anything they'd ever seen. They wouldn't let me go home.
Wow, that's great.
I really was trying to say, screw you guys.
You had nothing to lose, right?
Yeah, no, and because the guys that worked there regular, because they had regular cameramen in those days. I look back and I see 100 years worth of experience sitting on stools back there watching me. And I mean, I rolled the dice.
Yeah, that's great. You know, there's a great message there that, you know, you have to be confident in yourself and what you feel is the right thing to do. And, you know, there's a really good question that I want to get to here right now from one of our other cinematography students, Trey Dickerson, is asking, what advice or help did you bring to the table that helped out first-time directors? I think you answered that a little bit, but I guess let me rephrase that question to be a little bit more simple. What has helped you the most with working with first-time directors? Is there a skill or a mindset? What would you feel has been the greatest it helped you in doing with all these first-time directors you've worked with?
Well, to be honest with you, I've had to ask myself the same damn question. Why me? And I have to think that the way I went about it was, first of all, to get inside the gut of people like Coppola. Coppola is brilliant. He's a wonderful man. He's a buddy. He's everybody's father. He gave me the first spot meter I ever had because our birthdays are on the same day, April 7th. So, April 7th. So this year I'm 100. I don't know what he is, but yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
Amazing.
And no question. But I've had to ask myself the same question. And I don't have any real good answer other than what I do is find out as all I can about who he is. What is it he's trying to do? Because all directors are trying to make their own picture. First of all, you don't go in and read the script and then give your own version of how you would do the script. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is find out what that director's trying to do, because he's got his own thing he's trying to put in the story, the way he has the actors react to all the lines. So you've got to kind of get in his gut and get in sync with who he is. And then you can help him, because when he starts to do something, the extension of that idea, you can easily take the camera work and go in the same direction. Try to use the camera to help him tell the story the way he sees it, whether the person is good or bad, or wonderful or not so good. The angle for the camera, the way you tell the story, you stay in sync with how he is thinking, and that's very important to. With Stallone, I knew what he wanted out of his thing was kind of easy. One time I had 8 cameras up doing it, and Stallone did an interesting thing once. He decided to put all of those 8 cameras up on the monitor at the same time on different monitors for the editor. So now the editor can look up and see 8 versions of the same shot.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Wow is right. But it didn't work. I mean, the editor, he just
couldn't get his head wrapped around it.
But they tried it. You got to hand it to people like Stallone. They try things like that, which is beneficial to your own experience. You learn from them too.
Sure.
And, so all I can really say that I ever tried to do is I'd find out who the person was and get in sync with what who they're trying to be. And that's the only advice I really have.
That's good. It's great advice. It's like it's like a dance partner. You're trying to get on the same page with them. I think there's a lot of us and them, and when somebody comes in and they want to do what they want to do. I was telling my students one time that whenever you hear about somebody getting fired for creative differences, it just means that you want to do something and somebody else wants to do something else, and the director's in charge, not you. You're there to help him achieve his dream.
2 times I've had to replace a DP like that, and he was a person who would even sometimes come into the set with new pages that he wrote, and that's that's ego, and so twice I relieved him on picture. One was Cuckoo's Nest, and the other was Coppola's Conversation.
I know who that is. So I have another question here for you, Bill. and I imagine that this is going to be a lot of fun for you because of all the first-time directors that you got a chance to work with. But what film did you feel like you had the most creative freedom on?
I don't know. I quite honestly, you realize I'm going with first-time directors, so I had a lot of freedom, all of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like on Grease, I was a producer. I was a cameraman, hired as a cameraman, but I was working as a producer. Even bringing in the choreography that I liked. I did all of these things without thinking about it. I didn't think it out. I just did what seemed to be logical at the time. And I think that the truth is that I learned a lot of things in television. And if there was a difference in myself and other cinematographers at the time, it comes out of what I learned in television. And I mean, we had a TV show for first time people who wanted to be on television. Now that's going back into television way back when it was so new that maybe there was one TV in the block. People would get together in their rooms to see television because there was maybe only one guy in the block that had a TV set. And people don't even think about television in those days. But, there's people that became famous in the movies later on wanted to be on television in those days. And I discovered people on that show that I did. I mean, it's unbelievable, but when you're 100 years old, you have memories of stuff like that doesn't relate to anybody. Nobody can, no point in my even telling them about it because there's nobody around that was alive then. The numbers are small.
Sure. Well, you've seen a tremendous amount of developments technology-wise over your vast career. Is there anything that you feel is what you would consider the most significant or surprising development that you've got a chance to see?
There was one thing I thought was very great experience. There one time they decided to try to make electric power with atomic energy. And so they wanted to make a generator. There's lots of them today, but in those days, they had never tried it before. So they got the very first one up and working. And so they invited the TV cameras in to see all of the scientists from all over the world come and see this first time generator make electricity. And it was a great, great experience for me because I was just a television cameraman. But here's a room full of people that they didn't even know how to use a knife and fork properly. And so the power plant turned on the electricity. And I became the first cameraman in the world to use atomic energy to produce a picture.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, so you've got things like that have happened to you. And how do you tell anybody about it? Because there's very few people alive today that was living then that even cared.
Sure.
So today there is so much going on. We are jumping ahead so fast on even just like what we're doing tonight. We've got now abilities that have never existed before. And the concentration really has to be on that. Here, you don't know what it's like to sit and have 100 years of experience behind you And you go to talk to people today, and you can't really tell them about it because they weren't alive then. You know, people, there's a very few people I'm talking to now that was alive when Jaws was shot. Right. You're usually talking to somebody, they'll tell you how old they were as a kid when they saw the movie and wouldn't go back in the water.
Yeah.
But, so it's very difficult to tell people about what it was like for you at a given time. You know, it's like I mentioned the day that plastic was invented. You know, what you got to realize first, there was no plastic. Life was different then. Everything you touched today was not made out of plastic then. And all of a sudden on the radio, there was no television. On the radio, they come on and they say, you don't have to worry about the baseball going through the window anymore. They've got a plastic window now. And so the excitement was all this new thing to make a window. They didn't even think about any of the million of other things that would be made out of plastic in the coming years. How do you tell people what the life was like then? What you enjoyed? You enjoyed radio then. Radio was a great thing. Bing Crosby, oh yeah, man, you stayed up nights to hear him.
That's fantastic. I remember when we were on the phone yesterday, you mentioned that you worked with Tommy Dorsey in the big bands back in the day with in the radio days, and you know, just like fascinating thing.
I had a good ear for music, so they sent me down to get Dorsey and sent it up. And the same radio station that I worked for was owned by a 50 kilowatter, and I was working for a 5 kilowatter. There's a big difference, in honor of who you were. So I was using the same amplifier, same microphones as the people in the 50 kilowatter. And so I went down and picked up Dorsey early in the evening. Later on, they came in and did the same pickup, but it went on the Blue Network to the East Coast and around. So Dorsey called those other guys up and says, go find out what that guy's doing because your pickup is terrible. And so I had, my ego then really kicked in because it's really a lot of fun to see those guys humble themselves enough to come and tell me what they were doing. Wow. And what they were doing was really very simple. In fact, they were putting the microphone so close to his strings, and he had a whole row of strings. He mounted maybe a dozen, 10 or 12, and they make a lot more sound than you think they do. So your microphone has to be moved way back. So that was as simple as it was, just the distance of the mic. Then it fixed the problem.
Yeah. So you've got a tremendous amount of like technical background. How does that work as a cinematographer? Like if you were to shoot a film today, what do you think are some of the most important things that you would want to have at your disposal to work with? Is it more of your artistic background? The cameras they do so much today. How would that influence you today if you had to shoot a project compared to where obviously the original days when you were building cameras was like?
Well, first of all, you are an artist. You call yourself a cinematographer, whatever, but what you do is you go in there and frame every picture and move the camera a certain way, and all of it has got to come out of your head as an artist. You're talented. You wouldn't be there if you're not talented. You're not going to be there, so you don't have to worry about it. You are talented when you're shooting a motion picture because they hire you for how good you are. I never thought I was good enough to work in West Coast. As you talk about a person, but the people at like William Friedkin, who was a director then on television, he thought I was great and he used me to make, and we both went out on our own. He talked me into shooting a documentary on film. I had never shot a foot of film in my life when this happened. And we shot this and we won the award on the first one. We won an award on the second one. Second one was about Paul Crump, and it was a black man, who was to die in an electric chair. And we screened our film night before he was to be electrocuted, and they saved it. It saved his life.
Wow.
So right away you say, God, if film is this powerful, a little tiny piece of 16 millimeter film is that powerful. Hey, baby, that's the way to go. And that, as much as anything else, got me into the movie business. But it was Friedgen's idea that I was a good cameraman, that I had an eye, and that I was an artist. And he started saying some very, very flattering things about me as an artist. And so before that, I would not ever have tried to go to West Coast. I would never have seen myself as a cinematographer in Hollywood. So it was really somebody else's seeing my ability that had faith in me that caused that to happen. I never went to film school, as your people are doing. I recommend film school, but that I didn't get there that way. I got there out of television and had really taught myself the camera lenses and composition and movement. I had those things I had gotten. So when we went first documentary, we didn't even get the sound right. We had to pull it up. We made so many mistakes that it was hilarious. But our film, what went on the screen when we got through, earned us a San Francisco Film Festival's top awards, the first one and the second, and many more that didn't go through San Francisco.
Yeah. So Bill, I'm just curious, like, you mentioned working with Jack Nicholson. I know that he's a lot of people's favorite actor. And I know that he's got so much talent. Could you talk a little, this is one of my all-time favorites. I'm asking this for myself. What was it like working on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? That is, to me, one of the most amazing films I've ever seen.
Well, first of all, I had worked with Nicholson before because when he made his first picture, I shot his first picture. So he was a first-time director. And so he and I had worked together, I as his cinematographer, before I got on Cuckoo's Nest as the cinematographer for the director there. And the director on Cuckoo's Nest was from Hungary, and he didn't speak English very well. It was very early, and that is his first time feature. He had made a couple little things before that, but his first feature. And so the other cinematographer and he didn't make it, so they brought me in, and I had to reshoot a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
But
was it Michael Douglas hired him, the director? Was he, because he produced it, right?
Huh?
Michael Douglas produced that? Was he the one that brought that director in?
I think Michael Douglas had a lot to do with the director. I think he brought the director in and they didn't make it. So he brought me in, and I didn't really see Michael Douglas in person probably for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
They made their minds up before I even got on the scene. So I didn't really deal with him. His brother was a production manager on the set, so I've dealt with his brother once in a while. But the way that I got to know the film director was I read a book that somebody wrote about his life before, on his way to Hollywood. And one of the things that he did was Pieces of Eight, which was a thing about athletic jumping. A lot of he probably had, I would guess, more than 4, maybe 7 cameras shooting all this footage, all different kinds of athletics. And I screened that, see what he did with it. And that's how I got him. Because instead of showing the guy do the jump, just as the guy was at the peak of the jump, he had cut to a face in the crowd. And what I was really after was the people in the audience's reaction, not the other. I said, oh, hello. I had him like that. I had him.
Sure.
So when I went on the set, I didn't have to understand him. I knew what he was after. So he would say something, and even if I didn't understand all of it, I got enough of it, go set it up the way he's, and I knew what he was after. I knew where to put the cameras. For instance, when the other cameraman went to shoot a group of all those guys being questioned by the nurse, he was so wide you didn't really see what they were doing or thinking. So I simply took that same scene, which I had to reshoot, and I put multiple cameras on both sides. So I was covering the 2 principals, and then I had cameras on all the others, and they would search around. If some guy was doing something crazy, they was on him with a long lens.
Yeah.
And so that's how I licked the problem of getting what he wanted out of what was going on. All he was interested in was close-ups. He didn't want all the other wide shots. That didn't mean anything to him.
Yeah.
So
capture the personalities.
But you're talking about what do you have about these first-time directors? How do you get? I had the worst case you can imagine. A foreigner who doesn't speak English well, the actor would come up with tears in his eyes and says, he's mad at me. He's hollering at me. I said, no, not so. What he wants you to do is go take the medicine, go sit down. He did that, and he goes, he's great, now he loves me. I said, it was a matter of how do you understand a director who cannot tell you the little fine things that he wants. You have to switch your head over to think differently about what he's telling you. Take common sense answer to what it is he's after. Don't have to be a genius. You don't have to understand it exactly. And so he invited me to dinner several times. We got along great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. So speaking about directors, is there anybody that you haven't had a chance to work with over your career, but you really admired their work and wanted a chance to work with them?
Huge long list.
Yeah.
That list. That's a big, I can tell you.
Loaded question.
And mostly they were directors in New York, because there was kind of a thing about New York. So New York directors would hire East Coast people. They thought a lot alike, because, East Coast and West Coast don't, a New Yorker comes to Hollywood, you can tell in a minute the difference in person, the speed at which they work, entirely different, easygoing West Coast personalities, directors, otherwise, East Coast, different people.
Yeah. So one of our professors here at the university, Jesse Negron, is wanting to know, do you have any specific instincts or on where you put the camera and why?
Oh yeah, I mean that's you don't have time to talk about that.
Where do you start? Let me ask you that. Where do you start when you're blocking a scene? Where do you start? What inspires you in positioning the camera?
There's a lot of things you don't do. You have to have to be aware of them and do them. And the best way that you use a camera is so the audience don't become aware of it. If you start moving all around and all of a sudden it's about the camera, how did he do that? Today you've got the damn helicopters.
Drones.
Drones. You got drones out there doing give me a break.
Yeah.
So your decision to use a drone, for instance, I mean, that you should that should be very much on purpose. You should be careful how that happens. Everything the camera does should be to support the picture. You don't do it just to be doing it. That's it's got to come out of your head. What would be exciting here? There are times when the camera should move because it creates excitement, but you got to remember that you're pulling the audience out of the picture and putting them in the camera, and it's their point of view then that's racing back and forth. So you should use the camera carefully, every bit as careful as the actors do on acting the scenes. You should very much be on purpose.
Sure.
It's not an accident where you put the camera. You have to ask yourself, what is your point of view? Why? I mean, are you a fly on the ceiling, so you go up high? What's your point of view? Ask yourself. Then, if it fits, if it fits properly in your feeling for the entire picture, okay. But don't just put it somewhere just for the hell of it. Know what you're doing. And to do that, you have to have the habit in your thinking of, what's your point of view? What would be a good point of view here? You get all kinds of over the shoulders, some wide, sometimes, all kinds of views. And then television started the close-up. Close-up became just your face. In the movies, a close-up was maybe shoulder high, but for television, that all went down the drain. Not that it helped. Wasn't necessarily the right thing to do, but they did it.
Yeah.
And that became television, a television look. So now, even on the big screen, you'll see very tight shots.
Yeah. Well, speaking of movement, one of the things that we just talked about in our cinematography class last week was the dolly zoom. And I pulled up the example of the famous shot that everybody always talks about, that everybody always wants to, that shot in Jaws, that whole thing where they were moving the camera and it's like trying to explain the field of view transition and the camera perspective moving from a telephoto to a wide angle. How exciting was that shot to execute on Jaws? And I'm just curious the timing of that and how many takes did you guys take to get that? Because it's
not too many.
Yeah,
maybe two. I don't remember doing more than two. We may have done three, but we nailed it the first time. I had a good crew.
Yeah,
I had a top crew, good, really great people, and of course, what you're doing is you're changing the depth of field on them, and keeping the person at the exactly same size. But I had a crew that was so good the focus was perfect, because you could mark the thing along so that it was relatively easy to glance down and see where you were and get to. So you wanted to keep the very same size. And that was the tough part, the speed of the move, so that you had the same size all the way. That face just appears to come at you. And it was a shot that Spielberg came up with. It wasn't my idea. and he'd seen something in a Hitchcock, probably.
Yeah, Vertigo.
Yeah, and that sort of did it, but we did it with really perfect.
Yeah.
Who did?
Yeah.
Didn't do anything.
So, Bill, you just were talking about you had a really, really good crew. Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with your crew and how you rely on them to do the things that you need to in order to keep the visual language of the film the
Well,
way
that's
you
very
need it?
important. Now, when you pick your crew, that's very important because they do it. They're the hands that make the picture. They do it, So you got to have good people. And what makes my crew work well is because I run it just like the Army. You got the boss, and then you got lieutenants up and down the scale. So I run a tight ship. If there's any kind of problem, come to me. Do not go to, otherwise, pretty soon you've got actors and everybody telling you what to do. And I won't allow that. And I run a tight ship. So it's a tight crew that meshes together, and you share your problems internally, lick them internally. You don't get the outside people coming in, or you're dead. And so Michael Chapman at the time had done a thing for a friend of mine. And so when I started looking for an operator, he at the time was hungry, he was out of work. And so I invited him to come to the airport in New York, and I flew in and I talked to him to find out if he could be my operator, because he was right at the time when he was going to jump in to become his own DP. And so I says, I don't need another DP. I've got that.
Yeah.
But I need somebody that can be an operator and be happy doing that. And he says, absolutely. And he was very hungry at the time. He had been out of work, right? Because it was a time when he was trying to make the jump, and the jump from being an operator into a DP means you're going to be out of work quite a bit. And he was. And so he said, no way. I'll be your operator. I don't want your job. And that was very important. So I got this very talented, obviously, because he became a great DP on his own. He's passed away this last year, but I had him as an operator. I couldn't beat that. And so when it came time to shoot it, and I showed him how to do the handheld on water, use these knees. From then on out, it was easy going for our relationship. Went fine. In fact, I was doing the thing, and somebody went to one of the artists on the island and made a shark belt buckle. And so all of a sudden, here's the directors walking around with a shark belt buckle. And my crew saw that and they said, oh, hey, that's not right. They went out and got the guy to make one for me.
Oh, that's funny.
I knew gave me a belt. I mean, that's the kind of crew I had. I mean, they were great.
Yeah, I remember I went to AFI for a screening of Raging Bull, and Michael Chapman, he talked about working with you on Jaws, and they said, well, why would you go work for another cinematographer and he goes, I needed the work. I needed, and he talked, he goes, it was one of the greatest experiences ever, and he enjoyed it. And, I mean, gosh, who wouldn't have wanted to have Jaws on their resume for doing that? Let me see if I can scroll through and get to some of the other questions here really quick before we continue on.
That's the important thing. What is it they want to know?
Yeah, exactly. Here's a question from one of our students, Cameron, who's saying, what makes a film great for you? Or essentially, is there certain qualities that make a film better or great for you?
When they're asking what qualities, I'm really confused because
What makes a good movie? What makes a great film
Yeah,
to you?
What do you look for in a film? Like if you were going to take a project, what is it that excites you and you see like, okay, this is going to be a great project and I want to do it?
Well, the first thing I do, and I want, if I read a script, is what kind of truth is in the story? What are they after? What kind of truth are they after? And then what kind of actors are being hired for this? Do you think they fit the characters that are on the script? Because, those are all the things. So very often you'll take a script because of the actors that have the faith in it. If good actors have a faith in it, like Bobby Duvall, who taught me what underplaying was all about, and you learn from the actors a lot, and that helps you as a DP. You want to learn from those that are successful. Why are they successful? What qualities are they looking for? And you'll find yourself looking for the very same things in a script. And so if you're watching movies, how they play out how the different directors try to play out the story makes a big difference in whether, I find myself watching things that are very painful. And, there are some things that are very painful to watch. And those are the things that they're making what you consider mistakes.
Mm.
There's lots of little rules you make about a movie when you're shooting it. Like if you end a picture on the principal on one scene and they start the next scene and it's the same principal, bad cut. So you try to shoot your films for the editor. You know what the kind of edits, cuts the editor's looking for that he likes. So you try to end a scene a way that he can cut it without cutting from person to person. And millions of things like that. That's only one, but you're after all of the rules that you've learned about good movie making, like jumping the line. You have to learn what that's all about, because sometimes you want to jump the line and you want to know when you can do it and when you can get away with it. How the person enters or leaves one scene and what's that going to look like on the cut. So you have to know your editor, know what to shoot to him or her. There's millions of things like that help you make a good movie or make a good movie that you're watching. It sometimes is painful. It's painful to watch television because they make a lot of mistakes because of the pressure of time. They don't have time to do it right.
Sure.
So they just don't.
Yeah.
And it hurts. Painful to watch.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you are inspired by lately that you've seen? Do you find that you're watching films, television? Do you like to just watch stuff that has already been produced? Or is there anything that you've seen lately that you would say, like, well, that's a really good piece of filmmaking and storytelling? Is Chelsea laughing?
It doesn't matter whether it's new or not. That isn't, the qualities either are there or they're not. It doesn't matter whether it's a new or old piece. The same elements make it good or bad, and hopefully you have learned that if you're going to school, as your people are, hopefully you've learned that by the time you're shoved out into the rat race trying to find your spot. It's like I say, if you go to the museum and look at all the good artists of back in time, put that in your head. And when you've done it enough and have read, you should have read the books that they put out about why the guy's good or what made him different from the other person better. And so you got all that in your head. Forget it. Now it's you,
Yeah.
baby. You know, it's going to go through your personality, and your films are going to have the same kind of look, no matter if they're different techniques. You're still going to have certain looks to them that you're going to put in there because you like them. It's your taste, and it's you are the creator. You're the artist now. Paint.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
you can't be afraid. It's like I did the ridiculous thing at Universal and brought in bounce light. Man, to do something like that, there's got to be something in your personality that lets you do crazy things, because that was crazy. Taking a big risk, and you didn't give a damn. You gotta have that kind of thinking of yourself. You've got to believe in yourself, and you're either an artist or you're not on some level.
Sure.
Ooh, you know, you got to believe in yourself, and once you get that, you go to the movies and see how somebody else did it, and you say, "Oh, I can do that." Boom, and the bar keeps going higher, but that element has to be in your personality, who you are. You know, you got somebody who probably grades these guys if it's a school. You know, somebody's grading them. You know, you've got to be, no matter what somebody else, you know, no matter what your grade, really, if you don't have it, you don't have it, baby. You do, screw this other guy. No matter what he graded you on, you had something in mind, didn't work, go try again. Don't give up. You've got to just kind of say, to hell with the world. You know, you got an idea, you got a feeling for it, do it, go. You're the artist.
Yeah.
Or you're not.
Yeah. Well,
That's really all about. If you are an artist, go be an artist. Make the pictures, because everybody will put that camera on their shoulder and they'll make something. But your taste, your feeling, what you think is great, what you know and what you don't know, plus who you are, you know. And so I used to have friends in Chicago that were cameramen also. And so I got on the West Coast. Occasionally you need a second crew to shoot something in Chicago or somewhere else. You can't be there. So you get somebody that you know that shoots the way that thinks, that's got your eye, get him to shoot the second unit stuff. And sometimes that's important, because all the grips, the electricians, all these people become your hands. And so I think one of the greatest things for me, the most fun I have, is lighting, because it says so much. And so I become big on lighting. And I had a lighting guy who understood me, and we would go to screen stuff at night together so that we know what we're trying to do, sometimes successful, sometimes not. And today they have new lighting equipment, which has got to be exciting for everybody that's doing it. There's one case in which I don't like the lighting, and it's going gung-ho. That's on all the newspaper, all the news reporters. And the lighting is exactly the same because they are on it. They've got the new equipment now, and it's shadowless.
Mm-hmm.
It's straight on, baby. And there are no shadows. You have a nose shadow right there. You know, and I'm sure I have too. You don't, it ends that, there is none. There is no nose shadow. It is so flat and square on. And, you know, I feel like screaming at them, you dummies, you don't know what you're doing. Because what they're taking away are the little wrinkles and the facial stuff that tells you tons when you're looking at a face. If you, what that person is thinking, what's going through their mind will affect all these little muscles in little delicate, tiny little ways, so little that you don't even notice it. You don't know it, but you're watching it. It's part of what your mind, your eyes are taking in. And they're taking away all of that. So now you don't know what the opinion of the person really is now. They say words. Words don't mean a whole lot. Their attitude does. You know, how do they really think? That's what you want to know. You may or may not agree with them, but that's what you want to know. And they've taken it away. And they don't even know it.
Yeah.
Because they're all doing it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to end with one final question, Bill, for you. And it's actually a question that we were all asked when we were in Croatia together doing that workshop. And one of the last questions that we were all asked is, how do you get inspiration as an artist? What inspires you? How do you take care of yourself when things are slow and you're not working, or you're having a tough time, or you're struggling with trying to learn your craft and trying to get better at what you do? How do you stay inspired, and how do you, where do you go to get that inspiration, and how does that help you?
That is the toughest question of all.
Save it for last.
No, it is, because everybody, all your students are asking that same question every day, I'm sure. How do you get that first break? That's the reason I told you how I got my break. Somebody else thought that I was good in television and recommended me to Coppola, and I shot his thing and was successful at it, because Coppola had a lot of things going on, like only lights. He had everything in a pie truck, total, everything, cameras, lenses, everything, and all in a pie truck. That means you're very limited how many lights you could take. And I said, there's little 1,000-watt lights that had just come out with, looked like a cat can, little tin can with a 1,000-watt lamp in it. That was new at the time. I said, give me 20 of those. I'll light anything you come up with. And so they did. I said, a couple of them, I'm going to make 2,000 watts. Give me a couple of those. So but all of it can come up to 20,000 watts, and I can shoot any light, anything you come up with it. And I did. That's a movie that's up there. And those little tin cans, there's no lens. You can't focus them. And still it looks like and the way you focus them is the light goes out and it's not even. It's hotter in certain areas than others. There's just a tin can. There's no lens. Then you put the hot spot down, you bury the hot spot somewhere, and then you got the even, so the way you would move the little tin can.
Yeah.
But, and what the beautiful thing with Coppola, we first start out, it's a road picture. We're in Long Island, we come into New York, and we take the road. And before we got into New York, even he comes up with a wedding big thing, like 100-foot room in this hotel, and it had big beams overhead. And with my, I had to be careful because I only got these little lights. Hell, I'll just put them on those beams, and I'll make it. So we come in, and he looks up at the beams. He says, "I want to shoot all that."
Wow.
Yeah, right. Right. So I do not know to this day whether he was testing me or not.
Interesting.
I will never know.
Yeah.
But I went to my room, and they had a rocking chair, and I started to rock because how in the hell? And all of a sudden I thought, there's one place he won't see. Even if he shoots the beams straight overhead, he'll never put the camera straight up. There's that one spot. So I went to the guy that was doing my lighting. He wasn't even a lighting guy. He was a grip. We hadn't hired a lighting guy yet. So he heard that I didn't get to put him on the beams. He just threw up his hands and left. So I wounded him up and I said, get me a wheel and mount all those 20 lights on that wheel, put them out and paint it in. And you get to the center, put an umbrella and just a soft light right underneath, hot light the rest of them. We made it. We made the shot. Never not another word from Coppola.
That's great.
But
And do you know who copied that? Do you know who does that wagon wheel, that lighting like that? That's Roger Deakins has been doing that for a long time off of your invention.
Yeah.
The concentric lights. Yeah, that's great. Well, Bill, I don't know what else to ask you. I mean, we've had some really wonderful questions. I think you've answered everything that we could possibly want to know from you. And I know that there's a lot of great stories and so many wonderful films that you've blessed us with.
I understand that we can go endless.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm out of questions. I told everybody, I said, Bill Butler's the Energizer Bunny. I said, you guys aren't going to outlast him. I promise you that. He's gone for 3 hours at a time. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure. I wished I could tell the people, but everybody there is going to film school, wants to know how to get started. And with me, it was partly luck and partly I had shown my ability to somebody who got me in. So what I got to say to those people is make your picture, hell or high water, one way or another, tell your story, get it on a piece of film that you can show to people, electronic or otherwise. But, make your stuff yourself. You got to get your word out there and get somebody who thinks you're hot. I don't know any other way. You got to get somebody with influence to see your work and go from there. I don't know any real way to do it. I got lucky.
Yeah, I think we're all lucky to be in this business, and I think you've made it very clear that it's your passion and your creativity as an artist and your confidence in yourself has been a huge.
You got to think you can do it. You got to think you can do it. You got to look up there and say, I can do that, and go for it. First of all, because, I didn't have any formal schooling in photography of any kind. Granted, in the days of television, I learned a lot, but that was before you could put them on your shoulder. So it wasn't that kind of learning. Today, anybody can make it with their telephone. You can make images in so many ways. So, lots of luck. Go for it.
We actually have a class that I teach called Intro to Digital Filmmaking, and we're doing it on this. We're doing it on an iPhone.
Certainly.
So images are images, right?
Just go for it.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Greg Michael, would you like to close our webinar out this evening? Would you like to, any final thoughts? Here he comes.
Hey everyone. Yeah, just reiterating, Bill, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and all your wonderful insights. And I know that after we digest this, there's going to be a lot of other questions which we may send your way anyway. But really, again, thank you so much for lending your time and your energy and just your wonderful stories. Thank you so much.
And happy early 100th birthday from all of us at Azusa Pacific.
Thank you.
All right, Bill. We'll talk again soon. Thank you again, and thanks Chelsea for helping us out tonight, and thank you to Iris for all her navigating and getting this all to be made possible tonight, so we could enjoy this evening. So have a great rest of your week.
Thank you guys for putting this
You're
on.
absolutely welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everyone.